Hello, everybody. Welcome to Gimceo Network, where we have our first guest here to share her testimony. Thank you so much, Paige, for coming on and talking with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we are going to jump right into it, you guys. Paige has a wonderful testimony all about going from African spirituality to Jesus. And you guys go ahead and get your notebook, get your tea, sit down, relax, and enjoy this episode. So, Paige, we're going to just jump right into this. Go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. The city is called Livonia, Michigan. At one time, it was known as the whitest city in America. Um, when I went to school there, I went to school there from elementary school, graduated through high school. In most of my classes, I was the only black girl. Um, and I found that kind of started to take a hit on my self esteem a little bit in the way that I identified myself. Um, and I know that my parents, when they put me in that school, it was, to get a better education because they grew up in DPS. But
Mm,
um, I don't know. Now that I'm a mom, I can see how that might have affected me. But yeah, as a kid, I grew up in the burbs. I just lost my train of thought. I am so sorry.
no, it's okay. Did you, what was the Did you have like a religious background growing up?
Thank you. Yes, I grew up in the church. We used to go to all the services. So,
Hmm.
you got your Sunday school, your regular church, choir rehearsal, Bible study. We used to go through all that.
Hmm.
Um, and the way that God was taught to me and Jesus was taught to me growing up was like very fire and brimstone. Like everything
Mm.
you do, you go into hell. You can't have no fun because hell isn't fun. And I was just very fearful of God growing up. So
Mm.
in school, like I said, I was the only black girl in most of my classes. And so I found that as I was trying to relate to other kids, especially as I went to like high school, um, that I wasn't like black enough for the black kids because I talked white because I was raised out there. And
Mm.
I didn't really fit in with the white kids. So I was always looking for like a sense of identity, but I noticed that I didn't really like belong anywhere.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
mhm.
Okay. So moving on from there, after you graduate from high school and now you move on to college.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about what happened after that period in your life when you finally get to college and you went, well, I'll let you tell the story. Go ahead.
So I went from high school to college, and I was like intent on going to a HBCU because I needed, in my mind, to be around other black kids my age so that I
Hmm.
could gain that sense of identity. And so I ended up going to a HBCU. I loved my experience there. And one of the most impactful moments that I had there was taking a African American history class.
Hmm.
And I will say, because it is relevant to the story, that when I got there, I like made friends easily because a lot of the other kids at the HBCU, most of the other kids at the HBCU that I went to also grew up in the suburbs. And they came
Hmm.
from like more well-to-do families. I didn't come from a wealthy family, but they came from like more well-to-do families. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I don't know. We kind of related in the way that we carried ourselves and thought about life.
Hmm.
So yeah, I took an African American history class, and the teacher was like really drilling into us how, as Black people, we didn't start from slavery. She always said that you didn't come from slavery, you didn't come from twerking, you didn't come from selling drugs. She was like really like trying to break that mindset of the stereotypical Black kids that you see on TV.
Hmm.
And so she really pushed the narrative of you came from kings and queens. Sorry, you came from kings and queens. We were pharaohs. We were this, this, this. And I know y'all were taught about Christianity. Let me tell you where the story of Jesus came from. And once she got into that, then we took a whole test on it and everything. and I started to research it on my own, it was like something clicked in my mind. And I'm like, oh, and I started to grasp onto that as a part of my identity.
Mm.
Hmm.
So it was at this moment when you got to the HBCU, you're in this African American history class. You have this professor that's telling you, like, Jesus isn't real. Like, is that what she was kind of beating
Yeah.
into y'all, and that
Yep.
Christianity, this stuff was just given to us? I don't
Yeah.
know, to like
Yeah. She said,
ruin our identity.
yes. Yep.
Wow.
She said that,
So
oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
She said that Christianity was fed to us as slaves, as a way to control us. It was brought to us by the white man. It was taken from an actual, how you have Greek mythology. It's like an
Hmm.
African story, um,
Hmm.
and they perverted, twisted it, and made it more masculine to fit the patriarchy,
Hmm.
and then fed it to us that way to control us. That's what she said.
Wow. So
Hmm.
when you heard that for the first time, like, how did it feel? Did it feel like, wow, I've been lied to my whole life, or
Yeah. Because
wow?
you know what? Um, at that time too, in college, they really teach you to think for yourself. And
Hmm.
especially at the school that I went to, they wanted you to question everything.
Mm.
Um, and as I started to question everything, and a lot of things that may come across as conspiracies, when you really research it, turned out to actually be true. So
Hmm.
in my mind, I'm using that as context too. And it's like, okay, well, I've been searching for this identity. Um, you know, while I did go to church my whole life, I didn't really have a relationship with God or a relationship with Jesus. You know what I mean? I was just there because I was supposed to be.
Hmm.
And so when she was teaching us this background and history of where Jesus came from and the story of Heru and Set and, you know, Cyrus and things like that, I grasped onto it and I
Mm.
adopted that.
Okay. So from there, now that you adopted this new mindset, what happened next?
So I started to research a lot about it. And I don't want to tell the story because I'm going to butcher it. But essentially, she made it clear that our history as African people was matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal. Um,
Mm.
so the story of the Holy Trinity with the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God,
Hmm.
um, and the story of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and how Jesus came to be from Immaculate Conception and things like that
Hmm.
came from this African story. But
Hmm.
it was very women centered too, as far as that. So yeah, I started to research a lot on my own, and I started to dabble into certain things. I started to look into more of the law of attraction. I started to make myself my own God in the way of, like, instead of praying, I would
Hmm.
meditate, I would script, I would I would go buy crystals that did certain things. And I
Hmm.
haven't done it in a long time, so I can't remember exactly what the names of the crystals were that did what, but I just know that you would go to a crystal shop. I would go to a crystal shop, and
Hmm.
um, I would look for certain crystals that attracted, like, health, love, money, whatever. There was a crystal for everything. And you had to
Hmm.
handle each crystal differently. And you had to pick the crystals based on how you felt when you saw the crystal. You can't let anybody else touch
Hmm.
your crystal. It was just a
Right.
whole, and yeah, I became very immersed in that. And I noticed that in that my mindset became very, like, arrogant,
Mm.
in the way that when I would talk to Christian people, which is my background, which is crazy, I would talk to Christians. They'd be talking about Jesus, and in my mind, I'm like, they don't, they still sleep. Like, I'm woke. I know that Jesus isn't real. Jesus came from the white man. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It was a sickness.
So, so at this point
Yeah.
in your journey, you don't believe in Jesus anymore.
Right. So,
Mhm.
okay, yep. So at this point, I don't believe in Jesus anymore because I'm starting to manifest.
Mm,
And when I was growing up, like I said, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus like I do now, to where I
mhm,
know that when I pray and I believe, and all the things that go into it, having
mhm,
the relationship, having the Holy Spirit, I didn't have that, so I didn't know how to tap into that source. But what I
mhm,
did know was tapping into this manifestation was when I scripted and
mhm,
believed in what or
mhm,
who, I don't know. But when I saw things start to happen with that, it made me even more of a believer.
mhm,
And with that, I know you said that you were into it too for a minute. It
yes.
works, and it
Mhm,
works, and you attract and you attract, and it seems so easy until it just stops working.
mhm.
And
Right. And I love what you called that in your testimony. You called it bait and switch.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
it was like I was being fed exactly what I wanted, to go deeper and deeper into it, and to draw other people into it, and to, like, because
Mhm,
I was verbally denouncing Jesus and verbally telling people Jesus is real, verbally telling people like I don't believe in Jesus.
mhm,
And the more I started to do that, and it was almost like the devil got me right where he wanted me, you know what I
mhm,
mean? And then switched up. Like I just couldn't manifest anything, and everything started to fall apart. And my friendships, and ooh, it was just too much.
mhm.
It was a lot.
Right. Okay. That's where I want to transition into next. So once you begin to actually say out your mouth, like, look, I don't believe in Jesus anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in life at that moment?
So, it was just a whole snowball. So it started off with me losing because at this point I'm still at the HBCU.
Mhm,
So I started to lose my friends, and I was in a friend group, um, and we did everything together. Like we would have scandal nights. When scandal was coming on, we would go all sit in the
oh
dorm,
yeah.
like drink
Mhm,
our wine and watch scandal and talk about it. It was a good girlfriend group, and they just all just turned their back on me out of nowhere. Um, and I noticed that at that time when I started to verbally denounce Jesus, I started to become isolated.
mm,
Um, and I started to become depressed because I didn't have anyone. You know what I
mm,
mean?
mhm,
And so, yeah, I lost my friends. I came back home to Detroit and finished school here. Um, and it was out of my depression. I needed to be with my family.
mhm,
um, and I ended up getting a job here that I thought I manifested.
mhm,
And I was promoted very quickly. But when I
mhm,
left that job to go to another job that paid even more, that used my degree, um, I started using, this is when I started to use sage in my Palo
mhm,
Santo. I had my own place. I thought I was clearing out the negative energy in my place from whoever lived there before, or if I
mhm,
ever had a bad day, if I was ever depressed that day, I would do my sage,
mhm,
and attract all these entities that I didn't know I was attracting at the time. Um,
mhm.
yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel
you
like I'm
did.
rambling.
No, that was good. That was good. Let's go into that. Let's unpack that a little bit. So now you moved, you're in your apartment, you're burning your sage, got your little stuff going on there.
Mhm.
So at that moment, once you're burning this sage, like what experiences happen around that?
So I started to have paranormal experiences first at my apartment. I don't think I told you this in the last video.
Mm,
But at my apartment when I was living by myself before I got with my fiance, I started to, like, along with listening to these frequencies. That's what I was
mm,
doing.
okay.
And I started to, like, I would leave, I would come home from work, stuff would be moved around. I would be in my bed. I would hear my kitchen cabinets opening and closing by themselves. I'm like, okay, well, I just need to do some more sage. I just need to do some more Palo Santo, whatever, whatever.
Mm-hmm,
Um, Not knowing that was attracting more, right?
mm-hmm,
So I figured that I was just like spiritually inclined. You know what I mean? Like this was me being spiritually enlightened, and the ancestors or whoever trying to communicate with me. You know how it goes.
mm-hmm.
And
Third eye
so,
opening.
yeah. So I was like, I wasn't being physically harmed, so I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I just thought it came with the territory of being in the spiritual world. And so, yeah, I started having financial issues. I lost my job. I ended up getting another job in insurance, which I didn't know at the time, being naive and young and not having any experience in this, that the insurance job, while they promised you all this money,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was all commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what all commission meant until I didn't start getting the regular paycheck like I was getting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all depending
Mm-hmm.
on me. And so, yeah, I ended up having to file bankruptcy. I moved in with my sister. I was so embarrassed
Mm-hmm.
because I was known as being financially responsible among everybody that knew me. My degrees in finance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was always able to do for myself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And other people. So for me to not be able to do for myself, it was like a huge blow to my ego.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Wow. So at this time also, did you have like that conviction of the Holy Spirit, like maybe somewhere in the back of your head, like a little voice that's saying, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Like, did you have that, or was it just completely silent? You thought that you were just doing your thing?
You know what? I didn't have it at that time yet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have it. Actually, you know what's so crazy? So what's crazy is that I didn't start having that conviction until I met my fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met him on our first date, we went to Buffalo Wild Wings. We were supposed to go somewhere else, but
Mm-hmm.
we went there. It was a situation. So we went to Buffalo Wild Wings, which is like right next door to where we were supposed to go. And he was asking me about my religious beliefs, and I
Mm-hmm.
told him I don't believe in Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "So what you believe in?" And I was like, "I'm spiritual. Like, you do the whole spiel, and you try to
Mm-hmm.
convert everybody else into not believing in Jesus." And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, well, you can do that, but I don't believe in Jesus." I was
Right.
like, "Okay, cool." So we went on like that for a minute, but I noticed that like when I would like burn sage in our place together, like we moved in further down the line, but
Mm-hmm.
when I would burn sage and Palo Santo in our place together, he would always like look at me funny and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? But he would let me do my own thing. He would never like try to talk me out of it. But I knew that he was judging me. So, um, yeah, that's when I first started to get the conviction, was when he started to kind of look at me sideways because I didn't see anything wrong with it. And when I
Right.
talked to other people about it, it was always, okay, just you do you, I'm gonna do me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow. So now at this point,
mhm.
did you also have like other friends who were also into this, who were also continuing to like influence you? I know you
Yeah.
mentioned that you joined like some Facebook groups where, the women were kind of all in the whole, new age spirituality thing. I
Mhm.
want to talk a little bit about that and how it got to that point where you almost would have been like, I'm a witch, but you didn't go that far.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that time and the influence that was around you to make you go deeper.
Yeah. So yeah, I did have people around me who were really into spirituality too, and it felt like at that time that was all I was meeting, was people
Mhm.
that were into it.
Mhm.
Um, excuse me. Yes. So I did join these groups, these Facebook groups. It's like Black Women Spirituality or something like that. And I
Mhm.
was like always in it. I was always intrigued by what these other women were talking about. And
Mhm.
they would post like these spells or like this new crystal sheet that they bought or these books that they were reading. And some of them, a lot of them, would go as far as to call themselves a witch,
Mhm.
which was cool at the time. And so
Mhm.
I didn't have any judgment towards it. I didn't have any
Mhm.
conviction against it. I was actually drawn to it. And
Mhm.
I don't know if it was just the excitement of it, you know what I mean? And the fact that I was doing much of the same things that these women were doing,
Mm-hmm.
I just called myself something different. I didn't call myself a witch. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing about it was, the more that I researched it and the more that I started to align with what it was that the witches were actually doing, I became more open to the idea of, you know, calling myself a witch. Like, I wasn't firmly against it.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that from my background, you're not supposed to dabble in magic and witchcraft and things like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't consider what I was doing magic or witchcraft, even though it was. And I didn't know until later on, once I came back to Jesus and started reading my Bible again, that, anything that's not of God is of the devil. I
Right.
was aware of that. I wasn't aware of what my source was. I thought my source was myself. And that's where they
Mm-hmm.
get you, is that they tell
Right.
you that you are attracting these things.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the power to attract these things. There's another source within us that is attracting these things. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I was always spouting out too was that we are, the quote from Erica Badu where she says, "If we were made in His image, then call us by our name."
I've heard that before. Yes.
Yeah. So in my mind, I wasn't a god, but there was a God within me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessarily God, but there was a God within me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a whole mess. So
Wow, I remember having that mindset. That was me too. I thought that
mhm.
I am God. I'm doing all this. I'm attracting all that, you know?
Yeah.
Like one thing that I heard this saying on the YouTube video I was watching. He was like, if you God, then make me a tree right
Right.
now. And I'm like,
Right.
ooh, that's so real. That's so real. I love that. But
Hmm.
wow, so now tell us about how you finally came back to Jesus. When did you realize like, oh yeah, no.
Yeah. So I came back. It was kind of like in steps. So one thing I've noticed is that God, when He's talking to you, He may not give you everything right away.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to reconnect with different people. So one of the people that I reconnected with was this girl I used to work with at the bank when I first came home from the HBCU.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped talking for a minute and we reconnected because she moved out of town to Texas. And she was talking about how she got back into Jesus because all this crazy stuff started happening to her. She also ended up filing bankruptcy. She started having paranormal stuff happening to her. She's Jamaican, and so
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what it was called, like Obey. I don't know. I don't want to say it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a word for it, like a Jamaican word for what she was doing, and it's basically the equivalent of witchcraft. And she didn't realize that she was doing witchcraft. Like I didn't know I was doing witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to be on the same tip where it was like we're both into spirituality heavy. We would share like stories, share tips, and things like that. So it really caught me off guard when she started talking about Jesus. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's cool for you. But I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, even though it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
working for me anymore. But because it did work for me at some point, I just thought maybe I was doing something wrong. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so then moving forward, I have my baby, my daughter. Me and my fiance, we move into this house. My mom is staying with us to help me take care of my kids. It's my first baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so she moves in to help me. My fiance is working all the time, and um, I'm burning sage. My mom is into spirituality too. She introduced me to The Secret, which is the law of
Mm-hmm.
attraction. And so she's heavy into it. We're burning our Palo Santo. Whenever we see something moving around that don't need to be moving around, that didn't nobody even touch, we go burn something. Um, and so I start hanging up pictures, and me and my mom are sitting here having a conversation. And this happened on multiple occasions. Sitting here having conversations, and my pictures will just fly off the walls. And we're sitting right here. There's no
Wow.
wind, the windows are open, nothing
Mm-hmm.
touched it. It's not like they would fall straight down like the nail fell or anything. It's just they would fly off the wall like they were slapped. And we would
Mm.
look at each other and be like, all right, we got to go burn some more sage. Like the same to everything. And so I also started to reconnect with my cousin. And my cousin sent me a Pastor Mike Todd video
Mhm.
on Crazy Faith. And something in me told me to watch it. Because usually at that point, I'm like really like repelled by Jesus because I know better. But
Mhm.
I noticed that God started pulling on my heart little by
Mhm.
little. Like it was just like little, I don't know, like gems or something he would
Mhm.
drop every now and then to like, it's like a whisper, like he's calling me, right?
Mhm.
And so I watched the video and that just did something to me. Like,
Mhm.
but I wasn't fully convicted at that point. I don't believe, if I remember correctly. Sorry if I'm not. But what really did it for me was when I started to try Jesus, right?
Mhm.
So the point at when I tried him, like I said, we had just had our baby. We just moved into this house. I noticed my baby, she was literally like 2 or 3 months old. And she will wake up in the middle of the night screaming. And you
Mm.
know, like as a mom, you know your baby's different cries, right?
Right.
Like
Mhm.
a cry for hunger, mommy, I want to be held. Like
Mhm.
you know the different cries, and only you know these cries, right?
Mhm. Right.
And so when she would wake up screaming, like as a mom, you can imagine what that does to you. And it
Mhm.
like it terrified me. And she would be like physically shaking like she's scared at 2 or 3 months old. Like, what are you scared of?
Mhm.
What, like you just got here, right? So I started
Mhm.
praying over my baby. And I'm like, Jesus, I ain't talk to you in a minute, but my baby going through it right now. I need you to come do something, please. Because my baby, I can't see take my baby being like this, right? And like once I started to pray, at that moment, it's like I don't know where all of this came from, but it was like a whole release, like repentance, like
Mhm.
crying. I'm so sorry. Like um, for telling people I didn't, believe in you. Like it was just the whole thing, right? Snotting, crying everywhere. Come to Jesus moment. But at that point, going forward, my baby stopped having nightmares.
Wow.
And so, not to ramble,
Oh,
but
you're good.
once I saw that the nightmares stopped just from a prayer, then I started to try Jesus in other things. Like I started to
Mm.
pray over other small things just to see what would happen. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And when
Yeah.
you come from spirituality, you look for the manifestations and the symbols and the signs everywhere.
Mhm.
And one thing I noticed was coming back to Christianity is that they're so similar. It's just the
Mm.
source is just different. And the level of peace that overcomes you is just different. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Wow. I really like that. They are really similar.
Mhm.
Because I love how you mentioned, for a while it works.
Mhm.
The crystals and all that stuff, it'll work at first.
Mhm.
But once it stops, it's
Yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
when they start messing with you. Like, oh, we got you now. Wow. That's really good. So what would you say to people who are kind of in that place right now, who are in the midst of practicing, new age? They don't believe in Jesus. They've never gave him a try. So, like,
Mhm.
what would you say to them?
So what I would say is I've noticed, especially speaking from experience and noticing what's going on around me with other people, is that God and Jesus, they're going around and knocking on everybody's door. Like everybody in some way is getting that contact. And it's
Hmm.
just whether or not you choose to open that door. So, especially one who is in spirituality, you know what to look for. You know what signs to look for. You know what feelings, that you feel. Um, when it comes to spirituality. So you're going to know when it's spiritual and you're going to know when it's God.
Hmm.
And it's just, you have to be open to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say, what I would suggest, coming from the spiritual world and knowing how it can tear your whole life up so quickly, is
Mm-hmm.
that when God comes knocking on your door, that you just try it and
Mm-hmm.
just see what happens, and you'll become addicted.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say too, though, is that this Christian journey is not all like rainbows and bubblegum.
Mm-hmm.
It is a journey. So it's not something that you're going to get on and stay on necessarily. There will be times where you are on the journey and you're really, really close with God, and then you may fall off. You may slip back.
Mm-hmm.
But once you commit yourself to Jesus, you already opened that door. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So you have that relationship. You just got to tap back in. That's all.
Right, right. And I have been there. I can definitely testify to that. I have my moments where I'm right there next to you,
Yep.
Jesus, and you just kind of like, it's kind
Yep.
of like you have your seasons. It's up and
Yep.
down, and that definitely perfectly describes the Christian walk. It's not easy, but He will never leave you.
Ever.
He will never leave you, no matter how far you think you're gonna stray away. You
Mhm.
coming back. You
Yep.
coming back every time. Wow. And the last thing I want us to talk about is how has life been since you been back. When you came back, you back with Jesus. What are the ups to what life brought back to you at that moment?
Girl, you're gonna make me cry. Um, I will say the biggest transformation has been my relationship. I'm
Mm,
gonna explain. Because when we first got together, his name is Gary. I'm gonna stop calling him my fiance. When me and Gary first got together, when you first get with your man, it's like magnetic and it's like electric and it's like
mm,
exciting. We went into business together, like it was amazing. But I was coming from being raised as like independent, you do for yourself, you provide for yourself, you know, you don't depend on nobody. So to have a man that will come into my life and tell me when I got pregnant that I want you to sit down and let me take care of you, right?
mm.
I was like, you ain't about to trap me. You know what I mean? I need my own money, like,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I had to realize that, and this is so counterculture,
Mm-hmm.
but it's biblical for us to be taken care of as women. You know what I mean? And I still struggle to this day sometimes with my pride when people ask, what do I do? And I say, I'm a stay at home mom. It still sometimes is a little bit embarrassing
Mm-hmm.
because of our culture. You know what I mean? But at the same time, what I realized too is taking care of my family. Any job that I've had, no matter how much money I made, it does not fulfill me as much as this role that I'm living in biblically. And
Mm-hmm.
once I literally had to pray, because this didn't just come. Like I had to pray for my mindset to be shifted
Mm-hmm.
into what's best for my family. Because he was already in his role. He told me to sit down and take care of
Mm-hmm.
the baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was so hard for me to do. But once I started to do that internal work and align myself biblically with what my role is as a woman, you know what I mean? That's when I started to see a whole shift in the way we communicate with each other. The way he listens to me is different. The way I communicate with him is different. It's a lot softer as opposed to being so combative, which I used to be all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even about, you know, because submission is like a cuss word these days.
Oh yeah.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So it's not about putting yourself below a man. It has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with that. Because that was my issue. Was you're not about to see me as unequal to you. It was
Mm-hmm.
about communicating in a way that your man can receive, and I
Mm-hmm.
had to do the work to do that on myself to communicate in a way that he can receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So my
absolutely.
relationship transformed. mostly. And
Wow.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Paige, is there anything else that you want to share with the people? Any more tips and tricks and nips? Anything you got for us?
I would just say any issue that you have at all, no matter what it is, no matter how small, even if it's just a cough, you don't know if it's going to turn into just a regular cold or the coronavirus, just pray about it
Hmm.
and just see what just see what happens. So,
Hmm. Wow.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Paige, for coming on and giving us your wonderful testimony.
thank you.
So tell the people where they can find you on Instagram, on the
Yeah,
social media, which I also will link below.
sure. So my Instagram is Paige underscore Iman, just how it's spelled here on the screen. My YouTube is also Paige Iman, and that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paige. You have a wonderful day, and I will see you all again at the next Gimceo Network testimony.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.